Tav Kuf Chav Ches Amid Aleph, right at the top. Avalois Tevel, you are not allowed to be metaltal tevel. Tevel is muksa. In fact, the Gemara Pshita, of course, tevel is muksa. You can't use it. You can't eat it. Of course, it's muksa. More answers leitzricha, but tevel tal midrabanan. Avad, we're not talking about tevel gomer. We're not talking about tevel derais. We're talking about even if it's only tevel derabanan. What is that case? Shezora ba'atzis sheina nakav. What was planted in a flower pot that is not perforated, it doesn't have a hole. So it's not really considered to be growing from the ground. It's not considered to be yonik from the ground. And therefore, midaraisa, there's no chiyuv to be mafresh trumas and maises. Midrabanan, there's a chiyuv. So it's tevel, but there's no chiyuv deraisa over here. It's not tevel deraisa. It's only tevel derabanan. You might think it's not muksa, kamash malan, it's muksa. V'loi ma'aser rishon, and you cannot be metaltel ma'aser rishon where the truma was not taken from. If the truma was not taken from it, you can't be metaltel because it's also lachila. For the Gemara Pshita, well, of course, if you didn't have the truma taken from it, it's still considered tevel. More answers leitzricha shegdima b'kri. It's true that the truma wasn't taken from it, but we're talking in a case that when it was in the Crete, when it was already processed, it was piled up, the Levi first took the Ma'aser Rishon, and you might have thought that at that stage, if the Levi took the Ma'aser Rishon, and he's mafresh the Trumas Ma'aser, you might have thought that there's no chiyuv to be mafresh the Truma anymore. Just like the case of what we had, the parallel case where it's in the shibolim, in the stage where it's in the stalks, where in that case there's no chiyuv to be mafresh the truma. You might have thought that here also there's no chiyuv and therefore it would be muter. And we're talking where it's the Levi took it when the stage was in the Kri, and he took the Ma'aser Rishon. Shenitel mimenu Ma'aser, v'lo nitel mimenu truma gedolim. The Ma'aser was taken from it. Trumas Ma'aser he was mafish, but Truma Gedola was never taken. Ma'od the same because you might think that just like he said that Rapapa said to Abai that in the stage of the Shibolim there's no more chiyuv to take the Truma. You might have thought that therefore there's no chiyuv k'mashem lan k'deshar labai. Like my answers no, that there's a chilik between the shibolim and the kri. That in the kri stage you do have a chiyuv. The chiyuv doesn't go off. You have to be mafresh the truma. The shibolim stage, in the stage of the shibolim, that's where there's a p'tur from truma gedola if the Levi was makdim, but not in the case of the kri. And you can't say the opposite. You can't say that the P'tur should be in the case of the Kri and the Chiv should be in the case of the Shibolim because Hayidgin v'Hay lo Yidgin. V'loi Ma'aser Sheni, and also it's Muksa if it's Ma'aser Sheni where you weren't poided. Reflecting Morg Sheet, of course, if you weren't poided, you can't eat it outside of Yerushalayim. It should be Muksa. Gemara says Leitzricha. We're not talking where there's no pidyon at all. Leitzricha the Niftu v'loi Niftu Ke'al Chosan. There was a pidyon, but there wasn't a complete pidyon. There wasn't a pidyon that ka'aloch. What's the case? Ma'aser sheparol gabe yasima. In the case of Ma'aser, there was a pidyon. He was pointed. He redeemed it with something of value, but he didn't redeem it with a minted coin. In the chiyuv for Ma'aser as opposed to hekdesh, Ma'aser has to be redeemed with a coin that's minted. And over here, we're talking in a case where he did it with a slug. It's a metal that has value, but it's not a minted coin. The Torah says that you need kesef tzura. And it's only something which has a tzura. But something that doesn't have a tzura, that doesn't have a mint on it, it's not minted, you can't use it. And hektish achilo gabi karka. In the case of hektish is where he redeemed it on karka, on land. Hektish cannot be redeemed with land. It has to be with something with metalton. The Rahman mar v'nasan hakesa v'komla. The Torah says v'nasan hakesa v'komla, and it has to be a nasan hakesa. And Therefore, it cannot be done. You cannot be redeemed with karka. So we're talking over here. The chiddush is that this type of redemption is not a redemption at all, and therefore it remains muksa. Taisa says that there's really no pasuk of nasan kesef kamlan. Taisa says the pasuk is v'yosef chamishis kesef erkchalov. But Taisa says that many times you find in the Gemara doesn't quote the pasuk verbatim. Many times the Gemara quotes a short form to bring out the point of it, and it's not an actual quote from the pasuk. You cannot clear away life. It's considered life. It's considered muksa. Gamliel is matir because it's a maichal le'arvim. It's food for ravens. Tan rabbanim metaltal nesa chatzav. You can be metaltal chatzav. Chatzav is a type of plant that Yeshua was tichem es haaretz. He divided the land. The roots grow straight down. This is not muksa mibnei shumachal letzviyim because you can feed it to deers. Vesachardal and mustard mibnei shehu machal yonim because it's considered a machal for doves. You can feed it to yonim for doves. There's a shal in Rishonim. Does this brisa argue with our Mishnah or not? Our Mishnah says that mustard is considered to be muksa. We're talking about not the dried mustard that people would use in their achila, but we're talking about where it's not dried out. So our Mishnah says v'lo chardal, and here he's saying that chardal is considered a maichal l'yonim, and that's not muksa. So some Rishonim learned that it's a taka machlekes. Other Rishonim learned that it's not a machlekes. Every place according to its region, and in the Tana de Baraisa, they had the yonim that they fed it to, and therefore it was not muksa. He can even be metal broken pieces of glass because you feed it to ostriches. If you're going to say that, you should be able to be metaltal bundles of vines because you can feed it to elephants. Rav Shimon Gamliel, he says no. It's not the same. In the imay shchicha, ostriches are common. Pilam shchicha, it's not common to have elephants. Omar Ameimer Vudisli. Well, it's not so common to have ostriches. So he explains. He says even when Rishon Gamliel is mater, it's only for a person who has an ostrich. For him, it's mutter. For other people, it's muksa. Omar Ravashi Ameimer. Ravashi says to Ameimer. He says no, that can't be. The Carmelite of an Osler Rishon Gamliel. Chavilis Marsital B'neishu Machal Pilin. Well, if that's the case, what's the taina that he was made? That Rav Nosson said to Rishon Gamliel, well, you should be able to feed the bundles of vines to elephants. Well, if you're telling me that even by ostriches it's only mutter if he has an ostrich, he usually peel in. Well, in a similar case, if a person happens to have an elephant, amayloi, why should he not be able to be metalton? It's not muksa for him if he has an elephant. Elaroi. It means, therefore, we're not talking where he has an ostrich. He doesn't have an elephant. He doesn't have an ostrich. It's roy. You could feed it to an ostrich. You could feed it to an elephant. So we're not talking where he has one. But nevertheless, ostriches are more common and elephants are more rare, and therefore Rabbi Shimon Gamliel holds that what you need for the ostrich, that's not considered muksa, but therefore the zchuchis is not considered muksa, but the Isra'an for the elephants is. Amar Abaye, Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, Rabbi Shimon, Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Kiva, Kol Asir Lahu, Kol Yisrael B'nei Malachim. They all hold Kol B'nei Yisrael, Kol Yisrael B'nei Malachim. They all hold that all Yidden are considered royalty, meaning something that the royalty would have, the very wealthy would have. It's something that's roy for any Yid, even though he himself may not be wealthy, but it's fitting for him. It might be usable for him, and even if he's not wealthy, he might have that type of a luxury, so it's not muksa. Rav Shimon ben Gamliel Hadam, and just as we said, that he holds that the glass is not muksa because he could use it for ostriches. Now, most people wouldn't have an ostrich, only the very, very wealthy, but nevertheless, it's not muksa for anybody. Kol Yisrael b'nei melachim. Rabbi Shimon, where do we hold? He said that he holds that this non b'nei melachim sachin al gabi makaisem shemen veret. The Tanna Kama says that b'nei melachim can use shemen veret to use to anoint their skin. Shekain because they use it on weekdays as well. But for other people who are not b'nei malachim, the Tanakama holds, for them it would be considered a refuah. It's not something that we do during the week. But Rabbi Shimon, he says, Rabbi Shimon, Kol Yisrael b'nei malachim, and he says, Kol Yisrael b'nei, it's roy for b'nei malachim, it's roy for anybody, and therefore it's mutter. Rabbi Shmuel, Rabbi Kiva, where do we see they hold that? If a person owed somebody, had a debt, and they had a claim against him for 1,000 mona, and he wore a cloak, very expensive cloak, that was worth meya mona, and he has to pay his debt. So mafshitin, you remove it from him. He is a person who is in debt, and they hold, the Tanakhama holds, that you can, therefore it's not fitting for him to have such an expensive cloak. You remove that and use it to pay off his debt and give him a cloak that's suitable for him. But Tana Mishum Rabbi Shmuel, he says, Tana Mishum Rabbi Kiva, Kol Yisrael Rim Loisei Itzla. They say all Yidden Aroi Loisei Itzla, so you do not remove it. If for someone who is in debt and he can't pay his debts, you leave him. You bankrupt him, but you leave him his basic necessities. This is considered a basic necessity. He was wearing this cloak, and he had this covet. You don't remove it from him. Chavile kash, the Mishnah said that if there's bundles of kash, of stubble, and zmeris and vines, then if you set it aside for behemoths, for Michael Behema, you can be metallic, but if not, you can't. So they're bundles of stubble, of wood, and of reeds. If you set it aside for animal fodder, then you can be metalta. It's not muksavim lav in metaltanaisan. He says if they can be carried with one hand, you can be metaltam, b'shtei also metaltam. But if it takes two hands, it's a tirchi yasera, then you can't be metaltam. It's excess exertion. Chavilasiya is of a Quran is if you have bundles of these items. So these types of items, if you have these types of items, what the Gemara is going to explain these. If you brought them in to be used for firewood, ain't stopping them Shabbos. You can't use it on Shabbos. But if it was for Michael Behema, Mistapim Shabbos, then you can use it. If they were brought in for firewood, so they're set aside for a davar muksa, they're muksa. You can't be metal. If they were set out for Michael Behema, which is usable, then you can use it. Now it seems to be a problem over here because what about stam? Do we say that stam here in one part of it says that only if it was set aside for a davar muksa, then we say it's muksa. If it be stam, if it wouldn't be set aside for firewood, it would not be muksa. And the latter part of it is saying if it was set aside for Michael Behema, then it's muksa. Otherwise, it's not. So the way Taisus explains it is, what it means is that if it's stam, that if it's set aside for firewood, it's muksa. But otherwise, even Bistam is considered like he set it aside for animal fodder, and it's mutter. He can break it into small pieces by hand and eat them. So it's explained that this is sometimes eaten by people as well, by humans as well, so therefore he can break it if it is. It's not so common, but if it is used for human consumption, he can break it by hand into pieces and eat it. But he cannot use a kli to do it because it's like grinding. That would be considered like grinding and teichen, which is a malach. And a person can rub pods of peas or etc., that type of item, and rub them and to eat the seeds or the peas. As long as he doesn't use a kli and use an abundance of it, a lot of it. That's what Rabbi Yehuda says. He can only do it with the tips of his fingers and eat it. And even with the hand, he cannot do a large quantity, the way he does normally during the week. So there is some discussion in the Meforshim. It says, in Rav Yehuda, with a kli harbe. Some are not goyers harbe, and bavad shal yimlo bekli. He can't use a kli at all, even for a small quantity. The Rabbanan say, and go further, and even by hand, it's only with the fingertips, but not even with the hand, the way he does it b'chol. But with the girsa of his harbe is that even kli is mutter, but he can't do a large quantity. So the question arises, well, if he's using it with a kli, so how is that different than the normal type of extracting of the peas that he would do from the pod? Why is it changed? How is that changing from the type of extracting that he normally would do? And extracting the peas from the pod would be, and if he does it in a normal way, it would be malach, it would be a dash. So they explained that perhaps that Rav Yehuda holds, according to this Girs of Harbe, is that the normal way is not to rub it. The normal way is to beat it. So by the fact that he's rubbing it, that in itself is a shinoi. And he's doing it in that way. And he's also not doing Harbe. He's doing a minimal amount. And the same thing applies to amito, v'chein bepigam, v'chein b'shar mini tablet. All these are types of spices, and these types of spices, the same applies. My amito, what is amito? Is nina's mit. Sia, Amar Rav Yehuda, tzatri. Is a spice called tzatri. Ezoiv is a hyssop. Abarta is a hyssop. Koronis is shema. That's the name of this type of spice. Vahud Amrle, you're telling me that it's Koranisa. Vahud Amrle, man boy Koranisa, who wants to buy Koranisa, Vishtaka Chashi. And what he showed him was Chashi. Ella, rather, Sia Sachi. Sia Sachi, Ezev Abatas, Hisip, Koranisa is Chashi. Itmar, Bosam Maliach Mutul Talk Mishavas. If you have raw meat, but it's salted, it's mutter to be taltal on Shabbos. But basar tafel, if it is unsalted raw meat, then Rav Huna Amar mutter l'taltal, Rav Chisda Amar also l'taltal. So machlokes Rav Huna and Rav Chisda. Rav Huna Amar mutter l'taltal, he says it's mutter l'taltal. How can you say that? Rav Huna Talmid the Rav have the Rav Kirabi Hudas Firle. He was a Talmid of Rav, and Rav holds in like Rav Yehuda l'gabi muksa is more restrictive. He's makra muksa. So how can you say that Rav Huna holds that this basar tafel, that raw unsalted meat, is mutter? More says muksa la'achila like Rav Yehuda. Yes, he holds. Rav holds like Rav Yehuda. That's muksa la'achila, but muksa l'taltal sabra like Rav Shimon. With muksa l'taltal, as far as tiltal, if he's not eating, it's only tiltal, he holds like Rosh Hashanah. So therefore, over here, he would hold its muksa, but only as far as eating is concerned, not to be metaltal. What should be the chiluk between achila and tiltal? If something is muksa, it's muksa. Why should we make a chiluk? The Kilas Yaakov explains that the source for muksa, where the Rabbanan have it as smachta, that they were masmech, the takon of muksa is on the pasuk that on Erev Shabbos, that the man is gathered, it's prepared, whatever you have to bake, you bake, then the preparation of the food should be done from before Shabbos. So something that's prepared before Shabbos is mutar on Shabbos. Something that's not prepared before Shabbos is muksa. But the context of vehechinu is in food, in preparation of food. So therefore, as far as muksa is concerned, by oichel for achila is more chomer than tiltul ba'alman. Rav Chisda Amar also l'taltal. Rav Chisda said that the raw unsalted meat is also betiltul. And there was a duck that was raw, unsalted meat from the duck. They were removing it, they're taking it from the sun into the shade to protect it. There is a chasorn kiss, there's a loss of money, and therefore it's mutter to be metaltal, because if you're going to leave it in the sun, it's going to get ruined, and therefore it's mutter to be metaltal. So how can you say over here by the raw unsalted meat that he's the one that says it's also to be metaltal. You see by the case of the duck meat that he was matter to be metaltal from the sun to the shade. More answer, shani baravza the chazal umsa. Over there it's different because there it's fit to be eat raw. That's softer meat, so you can eat it raw. So therefore, he did not answer in that case. Ton rabbanon dag maliyach, salted fish, raw salted fish, mutar l'taltal. You can be metaltal on Shabbos because it can be eaten. Dag tofel, but if it's unsalted raw fish, also l'taltal, you can't be metaltal. Basar, if it's meat, bein tafel, bein maliach, mutar l'taltal, whether it's salted or not salted, it's mutar to be metaltal. You can be metaltal, and in stomach, Rav Shimon, this is going to the shita of Rav Shimon, that you can be metaltal, it's right to feed it to dogs. Taisus asks the question, well, if that's the case, what about the fish? In the first Mahalach of Taisus, he says that the fish, raw, unsalted fish, is less likely to be used for dogs, so it's considered muksa, but the meat is more likely, so it's not muksa. Ton rabon and metaltal and esat soma is bones. You can be metaltal nishu machal klavim because you can feed it to the dogs. Basa tafuach, if you have spoiled meat, it's mutter. You can feed it to chayas. My magulim, uncovered water that's magula that was left overnight. So people can't drink that. There's a chashash of sakona because the snake might have put poison into it. Nevertheless, it's mutter because you can feed it to a cat. But Rav Shimon Gamliel, he says no. Kol atzman also l'shoyse, you can't even keep it around because it's sakana, because people might drink it. Sakana, therefore it's muksa and you cannot be metal.